guys, welcome to part 2 of my book review for Orphan Train by Christina Baker Klein. This one is the one with the spoilers, so if you have not read it and you intend on reading it, do not watch this. Alright, so the book parallels the lives of Molly and Vivian. So you've got Vivian, who is a 91-year-old wealthy woman living in Maine, and then you've got Molly, who's a 17-year-old Penobscot Indian girl in a foster care system, and she also lives in Maine, so their lives intersect. Molly ends up living with Vivian at the end through a series of events. She gets kicked out of her last foster home. She ends up living with Vivian. I felt that the story was building up to Vivian like really being part of Molly's life, and here Vivian gets to meet her daughter that Molly finds for her, and so I think, okay, well, this is all fine and dandy. I'm glad they have some sort of relationship that they're building now, but what happens to Molly at the end? It just kind of drops off. I feel like Molly doesn't end up getting an apartment. She doesn't end up getting adopted by Vivian, which is what I thought was going to happen. I thought maybe Vivian would die and write her into the will, and then Molly would get the house or her inheritance, and none of that happened. So I feel like Vivian's life kind of wraps up and Molly's doesn't. Now, it could be that the author did that on purpose because Molly lives, when the book was written in 2011, and she's still going on with her life. So maybe it's supposed to say, okay, well, some sort of hope is established, but I just really felt really let down at the end of the book, letting Molly just kind of hang out there. She's about to age out of foster care and there's no resolution. So, as I mentioned in the first part, the overview of the book, I didn't like how it ended. Alright, so she parallels the two characters, Vivian and Molly. From a literary standpoint, it is important to notice that they both have dead fathers. They both have institutionalized mothers. Molly's is institutionalized in the jail system. She's been doing drugs and things like that. Whereas Vivian's was put in the nut house because she thought her kids were all dead. They're both passed from home to home. They both encounter prejudice due to cultural stereotypes. Vivian being Irish, red-haired, not thought of well in the 1900s. The Irish were not thought of well then. And then, oh my goodness, Molly being a Native American, she is misunderstood in school. So that's important to see that, they're both looked at differently even though they're not the same skin color, because of their cultural stereotypes. Both held on to necklaces from home. So Vivian had her Claddagh necklace. It was the only thing she had left from Ireland from her grandmother. And Molly had her little necklace with the charms from her father, each one representing a different Native American animal and the special characteristics behind each animal. It's important to realize that those are the things that they took with them. So in the first video I talked a little bit about portaging and how you're supposed to take with you as a Native American in your canoe the things that are most important that you can carry by land in your canoe to the next body of water. So Vivian and Molly both did a type of portaging, and from place to place they took what they could, and one of those things was their necklace. The necklace represents home, a little bit of self-identity, a little bit of self-worth and pride, holding on to your cultural identity even though everything else is being taken from you. So both Vivian and Molly learn to change and adapt. They're thrown from one unfortunate situation to the next, and they learn to kind of guard their feelings, hold back a little bit, because they know how people perceive them because of their family situation. They both inhabit new identities. They both try to avoid complicated situations in their lives, and they both keep silent about their past. Until they meet each other, and Molly starts to draw out Vivian's story. So, in a way, they kind of need each other to help express these past hidden pains that they have. One of the things we talked about in my book club was Molly essential to the story? One of the girls in my group thought she was. I wasn't entirely convinced that Molly was essential to the story, and it could be that I'm partial to Vivian's story more than Molly's story. That's one thing that you could comment in below on the comment section as to whether you thought Molly's story was essential to the overall novel. I think in some ways she was important because she does help Vivian bring out her story, but I think the author in a lot of ways could have done that without Molly at all. She could have just had Vivian tell the story from first person point of view the whole way. But Molly gives Vivian kind of an excuse just to tell her story. I think Molly also allowed Christina Baker Klein to comment on modern day orphans, the foster care system, and how that works. And there is a social worker in the book, and she seems somewhat interested in Molly's life, but it's kind of like, I'm just kind of doing my job, making you check in and counting your community service hours, and it seems like she sort of cares, but not really a lot. So I think it was the author's way of commenting on our current social system. When you see what Vivian goes through after getting off of the orphan train, it made me really appreciative of the background checks that people have to go through now to adopt. My sister actually adopted my niece and nephew, and the background check that she had to go through was extensive. I mean, they even had to baby-proof the house before they even got the kids in the house, and had to have it signed off on, and they had to get seals from their bank and prove their medical records and their financial records, and I was just like, oh my god, it's so extensive. But when I look at how things used to be run, I'm like, well, you can kind of see how it evolved to this because people abuse the system. And, unfortunately, in these days, you have child sex slaves and they'll still have a child doing all the housework and things like that. So you really have to be careful. So when I saw what Vivian went through, having to sew for 8 hours a day and barely being fed, and her the mistress of the home locking up the refrigerator and making her sleep in the cold hallway with one little blanket, it really made my heart go out to her, and made me appreciative of the current system. So I thought the foreshadowing of Dutchie and Vivian was just a little too overt, and this again could be because I've read so many books. Being a literary major, I pick up on these clues really easily. But the fact that early on in the book, Dutchie and Vivian got separated, and he's like, I will find you. And she said it 3 or 4 times. I was like, okay, I get it. He's gonna find her in the end. All right. I wish that it had been a little less overt, so it was kind of more surprise in the end when they got together. I was shocked at the social worker from Child Services who, when he dropped off Vivian, Dorothy at the time, because they changed her name throughout the book, when he dropped her off at that backwoods piney home where the porch was sagging and it was full of fleas, and the mother's depressed and in bed, and there's 6 kids running around, they're all filthy, and the father doesn't have a job. And he just left her there. He could see that it wasn't a suitable situation for a child to be in, and he left her there anyway. And then, oh, lo and behold, he tries to rape her. Well, go figure. His wife is a nasty, dirty, depressed sack of shit laying in bed all day. And, you've got this poor little 10-year-old trying to take care of the whole house, and, she gets molested, and then the mother thinks that, oh, it's her fault for leading him on. Are you freaking kidding me? throws her out into a blizzard. She almost dies, and then the social worker gets called and tries to take her back to the house. I was like, no way. You've got to be kidding me. Like, I was completely outraged when that happened. That's when I realized, okay, there are no standards. And his only excuse was, well, you should give it a try. Maybe you misconstrued what he was trying to do. Really? He, like, ripped your clothes off and tried to rape you. That was misconstrued? I don't think so, buddy. And the only reason was, oh, well, there aren't many homes that are looking for kids, so I guess you have to stay here. So I was really happy when the teacher was able to take her back to the boarding school for girls and, you know, found her a nice, warm, safe place to stay. And, you know, things went a little further uphill after that situation. But I was really appalled when that scene happened. Okay. All right. I wanted Vivian / Dorothy / Neve, because all three of those are her names. I wanted her to fight for her name. I wanted her to fight for her identity. I suppose she finds out who she is at the end. But, you know, it's important. Her name is important, and I found it disappointing that, you know, the first family was like, oh, we're going to change your name from Neve to Dorothy. Oh, okay, because Neve isn't an acceptable American name. It's an Irish name, and you wouldn't want people to think poorly of you. And then the next family's like, well, do you want us to call you Neve? We can call you Dorothy or Neve, whatever you want. She's like, oh, it doesn't matter. It does matter. It's part of who you are. Your cultural identity is Neve is an Irish name. That's what you should be called. And then the third family, who finally, like, did adopt her, called her Vivian because their daughter, whose name was Vivian, died. And, oh, well, can we call you Vivian because we miss our daughter so much? Well, I'm not Vivian. I'm somebody else. Like, I can't replace your dead daughter, you know? I don't know. It was kind of funny. I was just telling Tyrone, if any of you watch, you know, our videos together on his channel, Tyrone Magnus, you know our dog, Lucky. I've named him Pickles, and he always makes fun of me for changing his name, says I'm like the slave master who changed the name from Kunta Kinte to Toby. But as I'm reading the book, it made me feel kind of bad for changing my dog's name, because I was like, you know, if I feel bad for this girl who, you know, this is who she was all these years, I guess I shouldn't have changed my dog's name. So if I ever adopt another dog, I guess it gets the name that it came with. Okay, so I liked that Molly had a good heart and helped Vivian find her daughter. I thought it was nice of her to introduce this 91-year-old woman into a whole new generation of Facebook and internet and email and all these things that she had missed out on because she had put her life on hold after, you know, Dutchie died and, you know, left her without her true love. I was appalled that she gave up her child. I thought it was a total frickin' cop-out. It was a selfish act. I understand that she loved Dutchie with all her heart and she couldn't ever face the pain of losing someone else that she loved that much. No, F that. That's what part of being a parent is. And the very fact that she was given up and she was adopted out, she should know what it's like to not have your parents anymore. I was just like, no, that really pissed me off in the book. Let me know if that pissed you off in the book. And then finally, I thought it was really cruel of the hospital to let the mother think that all of her children had died. I assume the reason they did it is because she was a bad mother to begin with. She was really depressed, and Neve was taking care of the whole family before the fire happened. And so I guess they figured she would be unfit after. But, I mean, she ended up in an insane asylum for the rest of her life, and nobody bothered to tell her that her kids were still alive. Well, 2 of them, anyway. And I also thought that it was really cruel of, I don't know, the social workers or the hospital or whatever to not tell Neve that her sister was still alive. She went her whole life thinking that her baby sister had died in this fire, and here she was adopted out. And it was really shitty at the end that, you know, Molly discovers her daughter and then discovers that she died 2 years ago. So she was alive all this time, and she could have had a relationship with her, and now she's, I'm sorry, her sister, not her daughter. and she could have had a relationship, and now she's dead. So, you know, it was a really realistic take on how things, you know, could have panned out, for sure. It made me respect what, you know, my great-grandparents had to go through coming over from Germany. The Irish side of my family came over long before that. You know, the immigrants in the 1900s, they didn't have it easy. Ellis Island was not a fun place to be. So anyway, if you want a nice historical look through a fiction book at the history and time where the orphan trains existed, this is definitely a very interesting book. It's a different concept. I never heard of it before, so I definitely suggest reading it, and I hope that you got something out of this book review. So thanks for watching.